Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to today's session. This is guidance for employees and managing your mental health. I'm joined today by Workplace Mental Health Psychologist Rachael Alexander, who's Director of I Can Handle It, one of our specialist associates on the #GrowMySME program, sponsored by the Humber Business Growth Hub. So today's session, like many sessions we've run before, will be listen only. Please use the questions function on your dashboard on your GoToMeetings screen there, or sorry, GoToWebinar screen. If you have any questions at all throughout today's presentation, Rachel will field them at the end of her presentation today. So we'll make sure we answer all questions that you pose. If there's anything you want to ask about your business or an employee in specific circumstances related to what you're going through at the moment, please ask away. Today is the day to find the answers to your questions. So without further ado, I shall pass you over to Rachel. Thank you, Rachel.
Thank you, Paul. Hi, everybody. Welcome to this session this afternoon. For the next 2 hours, well, 1 hour 45, and then I'm going to leave some time for questions. I'm going to take you through a really comprehensive guide to understanding your mental health. So this is helping you as an individual, as a human, rather than an employee, if you like. We will touch on mental health as an employee and the responsibilities that your workplace has, but this is more really for you to understand about your mental health and learn some really practical strategies for improving your mental health. So that's what I want to take you through for the rest of the afternoon. Just to give you a little bit of background about me, if you've not come across me before, I'm a workplace mental health psychologist, and what that means is I help organisations to focus on the mental health in their workplace. And you might say, well, why would you do that? And that's because research shows that when you help employees with their mental health, it improves productivity and it improves engagement. So a lot of organisations now are appreciating that if they take the time to invest in helping their staff, their employees manage their mental health, then objectives are achieved and the company actually moves forward and grows. So this is why mental health is so important. However, from today's point of view, I want to help you as an individual to understand the concept of mental health and be able to make sure that your mental health is absolutely at a premium. So I also work with individuals. I have a private practice as well. I have 2 degrees. One is in counselling psychology and the second is a master's in consciousness psychology, and consciousness is just really a fancy pants term for mental health. That's how I see it. I've also had a couple of books published around helping people with their mental health. So for 15 years, mental health has been my passion. What I like to think that I do is make mental health very simple for individuals to be able to understand mental health from a very simple perspective. So today I'm going to share 10 ways for you to help your mental health improve. And they are ways that I use myself on a daily basis. So it's quite an interactive session today in the sense of I want it to be practical. What I would recommend is if you've got any note paper hanging about or any, a journal or a pad or anything, it's useful for you to take notes because I'm going to be covering a lot of information and there might just be something that you think, actually, I'm going to make a note of that because that'll be interesting. If you haven't got any note paper, then I'm sure you've got a telephone near you, an iPhone, smartphone, etc. So maybe just tap on there some information that you maybe want to follow up with that's going to help you after today. So that's a little bit about me. Let's look at the objectives of what we're going to achieve here. The first thing I'm going to do is explain what is mental health, because it's such an emotive sort of like couple of words that straight away a lot of people think certain things that mental health mean, and so I'm sort of going to blow a couple of myths there. I'm going to help you understand what causes poor mental health, how to recognise it. We will touch on mental health in the workplace and what responsibilities the workplace has. As I say, I'm going to give you 10 ways to have good mental health and then also look at sources of support in the Humber area for you. So that's what we're going to go through today. So the first thing, I always say when I stand up and do my workshops, that even if you take one thing from what I'm going to say to the audience, I always say to them, look, mental health is our own responsibility. And what I mean by that is, if I say to you physical health, you would probably get the idea that you are responsible for your physical health, which means taking the required amount of exercise that your body needs, eating healthy foods, avoiding things that are not really that good for your body, such as excess alcohol, for example. So in this society, we seem to have this understanding that we are responsible for our own physical health. So the action that I take makes me have good physical health. But when it comes to mental health, it seems that we're a bit confused around if it's our own responsibility. And I actually believe that comes from the fact that nobody has ever probably sat us down and said, this is what your mental health is. This is how you have good mental health. This is what deteriorates your mental health. Now off you pop and go and have good mental health. So I see myself as a little bit of an educator, that I'm here to help you understand how to take responsibility for your mental health. And so the process that we're going to go through today, and for looking after your own mental health, is a 3-step process. So I'm going to give you the awareness today. I'm going to absolutely show you what taking responsibility for your own mental health is. However, I can't take the action for you. You guys have to take the action. And then with anything, we have a maintenance plan. So let's put it back to physical health, because I think that's a really good analogy. If you get to the point where you think, right, I need to do something about my physical health. I'm not fit, I can't run up the stairs without, getting out of breath. So I know that I need to change my physical health. So straight away there, you've got the awareness that you need to change your physical health. Then what you'll do is you'll take the action. So you might start walking or running or doing exercise or going to the gym. So then you're going to take the action, your physical health improves, your weight loss goes down, and you become fitter. And then what you'll probably do, hopefully, is you would have a maintenance plan. So you would carry on being aware of the foods that you need to eat, the exercise that you need to take. So that's exactly the same as our mental health. We need to have the awareness of what is mental health, how to have good mental health. Then we need to be able to take the action, and then it's a maintenance program. So that's the process that we need to be aware of. Now, if you had been taught this at school, or maybe by your family, you would understand about what good mental health is. But as I said, there's a real lack of education, especially in this country, about how to take responsibility for our mental health. And what we tend to do is, if our mental health starts to deteriorate, and we maybe start to feel stressed and overwhelmed and tearful, we've been educated to, a lot of us have, to pop off to the doctors and say, look, I can't stand the way that I'm feeling. I can't sleep, I'm overwhelmed, I'm stressed, I'm irritable. And so the doctor will give you some tablets. And I'm going to touch on medication later in the session, and sort of like talk to you about the challenge with taking antidepressants. So I'm going to cover all angles. So let's have a look at what is mental health anyway. So mental health is simply a spectrum of the thoughts that we think, the feelings that we experience, and how that influences our behaviour. So if I have good mental health, then what that means is I'm thinking positive thoughts, I'm feeling in an empowered, inspired way, which means I'm going to behave in a productive way. So if I wake up in the morning and I have negative thoughts, that means I'm going to feel negative, and therefore my behaviour is going to represent that negative thought and that negative feeling. So a major part of mental health is saying, well, okay, Rach, how do I change my thoughts from negative to becoming more positive? And that's exactly what I'm going to teach you throughout this process. So good mental health is you living life to the full. Poor mental health means your thoughts and feelings are affecting your day-to-day living and the enjoyment of that day-to-day living. And then, of course, sadly, we have the extreme end, which is severe mental health, which is when life absolutely becomes impossible to cope with. And sadly, with suicide being the only way out that some people think that they have. So that is simply what mental health is. So if I said to you, okay, I want you to think of mental health and what words pop into your head, the words that would probably pop into your head may be something like stress, depression, anxiety, suicide, helpless, fed up. That's, you know, the stress and the depression and anxiety, that's just one end of mental health. That's poor mental health. But where we need to be operating from every single day is good mental health. And again, that's what I'm going to do is show you how to get to that place. So I tend to see it like this. As I say, I'm quite a simple girl. Is a spectrum, a line. At one end you've got poor mental health, and at the other end you've got good mental health. If we were monitoring severe, clearly severe at the left hand side of the poor mental health. And so what we can say is, how is my mental health today? We could literally plot that on that line. So some days I might be at a number 9. Some days I might be at a number 6. Some days in the past, not now, but in the past, I would maybe be at a number 4. So can we see that it's a spectrum, that our mental health will fluctuate each day, each week, each month, each year, and that's okay. That's part of mental health. But the idea is if we wake up one day and we think, right, my mental health is at a 5 today, what very few of us know how to do is to get it up to a number 9 or a number 10. So that's, again, what we need to learn. How do I shift from being at a number 4, number 5, and being at a number 10 or number 9 or a number 8? So what you can see is it says on that slide, it's affected by a range of factors called life. So for example, at the moment, with a lot of uncertainty, with a lot of people out of the comfort zone and not able to do the things that they enjoy doing, for a lot of people, their mental health has gone more to that left-hand side, to that poor. As soon as they start to announce maybe that lockdown is going to be released and that things can go back to normal, whatever normal means, then for a lot of people, they will swing back up to the 7, 8, 9 as they can start to see the friends, see the family, go out to the pub, you know, go do more exercise, etc. So how do we stop challenging life events by putting us at a number 4 or number 5? Because one thing I know at 40, nearly 47 years of age, is that life has this amazing ability to make things happen that can make us feel upset, that can make us feel out of control, that can make us feel overwhelmed. So what I try and do for people is, if they are in that place where they're feeling overwhelmed, is for them to not lose their power, for them to not shift to that poor left-hand side, so that we're talking about resilience here. So whatever happens to us, we can stay strong, we can stay powerful, and we can stay feeling, thinking and behaving in a good way. So for those of you that you know, working in companies, this is a really good scale to have just simply on a piece of flip chart in your office. Part of what I do is help companies remove the stigma about mental health. So if we have something like a chart like this in the office, it's helping people understand that we're going to talk about mental health. Mental health is needed to talk about, and that it's okay to be at a number 3 or a number 4, but what are we going to do as an organisation or as an individual to get us back up to a number 7 or 8 or 9? Because I don't know about you guys, but when I'm at a 7, 8 or 9, I'm at my most productive, I'm at my most motivated, I'm at my most engaged, because I have the mental capacity to focus on the task in hand. So you maybe want to just draw that out quickly and think, actually, where am I today? Am I more at the poor, or am I more at the good end? Now, the good thing about mental health is, the quicker you realise that you've dropped down that scale and you might be at a number 3 or a number 4, the quicker you can take action to improve your mental health. And, you know, when I'm running workshops, one of the things I always talk about is this rug that many people seem to have. And I don't know if you've got one of these magic rugs in your house, but what tends to happen with these rugs is, if we start to feel annoyed, irritated, stressed, might be with our partner, it might be with our children, it might be with our boss, our colleagues. What many people have been taught to do is to get this magic rug and to brush all the problems underneath that magic rug and then put that magic rug over all the problems. But again, in 46 years, I've never ever seen that work, because what it means is the problems are still there, the challenges are still there, the feelings of overwhelm and stress are still there. So part of taking responsibility for our mental health is having the courage to look at what's causing us stress and take action to resolve it. And when I get people in my therapy room, what I see is that when the challenge first started, they ignored it. They didn't deal with it because of fear. And I'm going to talk about that as we move through the presentation. So, please don't have one of these rugs. If there is something causing you stress or pressure or overwhelm at the moment, this is the time to sit down and have a look at it and take action. So let's have a look at what tends to happen. So I tend to use the analogy of a bucket. So when clients come and see me, or when I do work in organisations, the first thing I'll do is I want to know what pressures the individual is facing. And so I ask them, tell me everything that's going on in your life at the moment, everything that you're mentally and emotionally have to deal with. So they may say things like finances, I'm struggling with my finances at the moment. My health, or a parent or my child is not in a good place physically, mentally. So I'm having to support them with that. I'm having to deal with that. Then, I've got a demanding workload where I feel as though I'm never catching up with my work. So I'm always feel as though I'm playing catch up. And then I had a row with my sister many years ago, and that's preying on my mind because it makes it very difficult. And I've also got problems with, my husband's family because they're expecting this, that, and the other. So what we tend to have, guys, is this bucket where everything that we're trying to deal with as a human goes into this bucket. And gradually the pressures build up and build up and build up. And that's when we start to feel stressed. So if you like, we could have a little tap or a little hole put in this bucket. I'm not going to start singing, don't worry. And what we have to do is, if you like, relieve some of those pressures of what's going on in our life. And this is why that magic rug that isn't so magic doesn't work, because it's not getting rid of the pressures of what's causing us pressures. The only way we can get rid of the pressure is we have to take action, and that's where the courage comes in. So again, you might want to just take a second to literally just draw a bucket and think, what's causing me stress in that bucket? So what pressures are you feeling right now? And clearly in these times of COVID, I get it, there's increased pressures. What else is going on for you? And what pressures is COVID causing you? So the best way to do it is literally just get a piece of paper and just throw all the ideas down of what pressures you are feeling right now. I know as a mum, I've got a 15-year-old, I'm a full-time single parent. I've got the pressures of, what's going on for my 15-year-old. I've got my dad actually in hospital this afternoon, having an operation. So, that could be seen as a pressure. I've got a sister that's just finished her chemotherapy. Again, more pressures. So just list absolutely everything down about what pressures are you feeling right now. And you might want to carry it on tonight or tomorrow. But this will help your mental health. It might not help it in the short term, because obviously you're looking at it, you're thinking about it, but I'm going to tell you how to manage that. So what pressures are you feeling right now? And then that's the awareness. This is the first stage, awareness of what is causing you pressures. So once you've done a bit of a, dumping all your thoughts, you're then going to look at your list. And you're going to say, okay, well, which one out of all those different pressures is causing me the most pressure? So if you like, you're going to prioritize them. You're going to label them 1, 2, 3. You're going to find out which pressure is taking up the most mental thinking, or which pressure is causing you the most worry at the moment. And then you're going to look again at your list and say, okay, which one's number 2? which one's number 3. So what you'll have by the end of it is a lovely list of what's causing you pressure, what's causing you to feel overwhelmed, and you'll have it in order so you know which one you need to deal with. And I'm going to give you ways to be able to deal with those. So that's giving you the awareness of what's causing you the mental pressure in your brain. We're then going to go to stage 2. We're going to say, okay, so let's go to action. And the aim with this, guys, is to reduce the pressures, to try and reduce the pressures in some way. So you take the one that you labelled number 1 and you say, right, what action do I have to take right now to deal with this so that I'm reducing it? Now, I've had it in my time where I haven't had a clue what the right action to take is, in that I haven't known if it's the right action. But what I've realised over my years is even me just taking action has made me feel more empowered, more in control, more that I'm part of the solution, part of sorting this out. So don't worry if you don't know what the right action is. Simply just writing one action can help you feel much more in control, and your mental health will be better. Now, once you've realised what action you can take, it might be that you then have to sit down and say, okay, well, whose responsibility is it to reduce this pressure? Because often when you've got especially conflict, there's 2 people that are responsible for what's going on. So a lot of the work that I do is for men and women that have got to the point where they've realised their marriage is over. And so I always say to them, hang on, there's 2 people in this relationship. What's your responsibility and what's the other person's responsibility? Because what tends to happen is those that are suffering with the mental health, and you might be one of these people, is they are the type of people that tend to take too much responsibility for somebody else. They want to sort out somebody else's life. And our one and only task is to make sure that our life is the life that we are wanting to live. Yes, if you have children that are under 18, we have a responsibility to assist them. But just ask yourself, right, this thing that's stressing me out, does that belong to me or does it belong to somebody else? Are you trying to change somebody else's behaviour? Because don't bother trying to change somebody else's behaviour, just look at yourself. So you're going to work out whose responsibility. It might be 2 people, it might be 3 people, it might just be yourself. And then you're going to ask yourself, okay, what action do we all have to take about this? What action will get a solution? And you're going to ask them the similar type of question as what you're asking yourself. Okay, we've got a challenge here. What are we going to do to resolve this? And then simply just write a sentence of how you will know that this particular pressure that you're working on has been resolved, because that's where you're trying to get to. That's your end goal. That's what the solution is. And of course, put an expected completion date there so that you know that these actions are going to try and get to some sort of resolution for you. So you're going to identify the pressures and you're going to label the pressures in priority. And then for each one, you're going to go through this process of asking, what action can I take to reduce these pressures? Okay, so a good thing, building on from what I've just been talking about, and this is, some of you may have seen this from a self-help book that was written by a guy called Stephen Covey many years ago. And again, it's something that I had to really learn. And if I'm feeling stress and pressure now, because I'm human, and even though I know everything that I do, I still can fall into the trap of feeling overwhelmed. I literally look at what I'm stressing about and I'll say, okay, is this within my control? So let's take my dad that's having an operation this morning to have a cancerous mole removed from his back. I've got to say to myself, am I in control of making that situation resolve? Is there anything I can do to make sure that he comes through that operation 100%, sorted, happy? And my answer is no, that's not within my control. So part of learning to have good mental health is to understand what is in your control and what is out of your control. Now, don't get me wrong, I can influence things happening. I can, you know, try and suggest things that will make for a better outcome, like saying to my mum, yes, I think you do need to take him to hospital, even though there's the COVID about. I think you do need to book it in and you do need to have it done. But at the end of the day, it's out of my control. So how you're going to use this diagram, guys, is you're going to take the list of pressures that you have of what's worrying you, of what's causing you stress. And with each one, you're going to say, would this come into the inner circle? So is it in my control? Can I sort it out? Can I influence it? Or is it out of my control? And what you'll probably find is that 60 to 70% of what is stressing you out is not even within your control. And so if you write it in the outside circle, so what I do is I actually draw these out on an A4 piece of paper and actually plot what's causing me stress. If I've written them in the outside circle and I've realized that there's no point worrying about this, there's nothing that you can do about it, you just have to let go, you just have to trust, you just have to surrender. And COVID is a brilliant example of this. I cannot control how many masks are out there or how many tests there are or whether these tests are right. I can't control that, so I've just got to let it go. And there is a magic bucket that I like called the FCUK bucket, spelled incorrectly, obviously. And what I've learned to do over the years is everything in that outside corner, I drop into the FCUK bucket, because there's nothing that I can do about it. And what I find is my mental health improves. So what you're looking for is the thing that's causing me stress and pressure in my control? If it isn't, you're going to ask, okay, can I influence it? And there might be something that you can do to influence it. But if it is not in your control, if there's nothing that you can do to influence the outcome of a situation, then let it go, guys. You've just got to let it go. And that takes practice, because we can all be control freaks. We all like to be in control. But if it's somebody else's behavior that you're trying to change, my advice would be, don't bother, just look at yourself. So even with a 15-year-old, I can influence his behavior, but I can't control him. So this is a really powerful strategy that I use. So let's have a look at stress, because a lot of people refer to the fact that I'm stressed, or, you know, my stress is really bad. And the great thing about stress is that it's all rooted in perception. And what I mean by that is this you know, sort of like good example here of the definition of stress is, I get stressed if I believe that the perceived demands being placed upon me are higher than my perceived ability to handle these demands. So let me give you an example of that. Being asked to present a webinar for Humber Business Growth Hub. Normally I am face-to-face. I normally go into workshops. I've been running workshops for over 15 years, so they don't cause me stress. So the first time I get asked to do a full workshop online, what I've got to assess in my mind is, okay, so there's a demand being placed upon me here to do an online workshop. What do I perceive my ability is to handle this request? So once I can ask myself that, and I can go, well, do you know what, I have another business where I conduct meetings on Zoom. I can conduct those fine. I'm okay on those. I'm good at those. So I know my material. So okay, it's just going to be a little bit different. So if we start to feel stressed, again, it's a really good technique to just look at what you're getting stressed about and ask yourself, do I have a perception that I can't handle this, that I can't deal with this? So for a lot of people that were asked to work from home at the start of COVID, it will have caused some stress, because the demand of, we want you to work from home, will have been higher than their perceived ability to handle that request. And so what we're talking about here, guys, is we're talking about resilience. That's what we're talking about. And again, when I go into workplaces, what I'm saying to the owners and the chief exec and the board is, you need your staff to have such high levels of resilience, so no matter what you ask them or the demands that you placed upon them, they have the perceived ability to handle these demands. So the great thing about this is stress is not an external thing. Stress is an internal attitude. Because can you see that it says perceived? So if we can start to change the way that we are perceiving demands that are being placed upon us, and we can build our confidence and go, I can rock this, this is no problem, I'll have a go, I'll do it, then we won't get stressed. Yes, we might feel a little bit anxious, we might feel a little bit, a bit on a high, a bit fearful, but at the end of the day, that's a different type of stress. That's a stress that's pushing you to be the best version of yourself. And that's the type of stress that you want. Now, sometimes you will get demands placed upon you and you will look and go, no, there's no way I can deal with all those demands that are placed upon me. I just haven't got the time. And that's when we need to have a conversation with somebody and say, what you're expecting of me, I'm sorry, I can't do that. So which one do you want me to focus on? Because people will keep putting demands on you until you say no. And I've worked with companies where, the high management figure has gone off with stress. And the chief exec is like, well, I didn't know he was feeling stressed. He didn't tell me. So, who's to be accountable in that situation? If the executive didn't, say, no, there's too many demands placed upon me and I just can't manage these demands, then, whose responsibility is it? So there will be times, guys, where you have to say no, because you've looked at the list or whatever the situation is and you've said no, that there's no way I can meet the demands that you're being placed upon me. And sometimes we're in workplaces or we're in relationships where we are in them with bullies. There are bullies in our life, and so part of our power is being able to turn around and say, no, it's not happening. It's not happening anymore. And your mental health can get affected by being in an environment like that. There's a great meme on Facebook, and I think sort of got a picture of Einstein, but I'm sure it wasn't Einstein who said it, but it's something like, before you diagnose yourself with depression and anxiety, make sure you're not surrounded by an asshole. And I'm sorry, that is so true, that so many people's mental health gets affected by people who have no empathy, who are unable to resonate with what's going on for that person. So just have a check around you and think, is it another person that's putting stress on me? Is that stress appropriate or is it not appropriate? And as part of this funding, you can apply for one-to-one support sessions with myself. So if you feel you need some support relating to if that's going on in your business, then please reach out. And even if you're a business owner or you're a manager, please be aware that staff can bully us as well. It's not just the other way around. Our staff can bully us as well. So please reach out if you feel you need that support. So if we're feeling stressed, what we can now say is, okay, it's my perception. How do I change my perception? And again, the 10 strategies that I'm going to help you with will be able to help you change your perception of stress. So really quickly, let's just look at where stress originates, because this is quite useful to know. If there's any neuroscientists in the audience, I'm really sorry, it's not to scale, and it's probably not that accurate in a sense, but it gives you a good understanding. So as a human, we have two parts of our brain. We have what's called a limbic system. I sort of like point over there, but I don't know if it is over there. We have a limbic system, and then we have a prefrontal cortex. So we're going to call the limbic system our emotional brain. Yeah, our emotional brain. We're going to call the prefrontal cortex our resilient brain, or our thinking brain. So the resilient brain is like your strategy, it's your logic. So you'll have times when you're absolutely working in pure logic, you're being reasoned, you've got strategy, you've got a plan, you know what's happening. That's brilliant, you're using your cognitive skills. You'll have other times where you just feel emotionally overwhelmed and you just can't think straight, you can't sleep, you're starting to get irritable. What's happened is your emotional brain has basically took over your thinking brain. And a good example of this, so I tend to give a lot of examples from my own life, is when I was married, I would have a lot of arguments with my husband. I'm not married anymore. And what would happen is we'd be in this argument about something irrelevant, and I would absolutely just get so overwhelmed with my emotion that I would either storm out, or I once threw my son's feeding bottle at him, dare I say, because I was just so emotionally overrun with it all. And what had happened is my emotional brain was trying to protect me. It was trying to say, right, you're in a situation here which is not good, so what we're going to do is flood you with a load of chemicals, a load of hormones, adrenaline, cortisol, because we want to protect you, because we think you either need to get out of this situation, Rach, or you need to fight back, or you just need to freeze. So I'm sure a lot of you have heard of the flight, fight, or freeze. And this is where the emotional brain, that's what that's responsible for. It injects your bloodstream with adrenaline and cortisol. So take yourself back to COVID. I remember I don't tend to watch the news because I find that it triggers a lot of fear and a lot of adrenaline and cortisol. And I was watching the news, and I was watching all sort of like the doom and everything of all these figures. And I could feel my fear getting triggered, and I could feel myself start to worry, and I could feel the stress coming on. And so what I had to do is take a step back and go, right, hang on a minute, it's because you've engaged with that fearful source, and therefore your emotional brain has stopped your common sense thinking rational brain from working. And so this is the challenge that we have with in relationships. Sometimes we are with people where their emotional brain is totally in charge of their thinking brain. And sometimes we have people that don't have emotions, that just can't be emotional and are very clinical. So we need to have a balance. We need to have a balance of an emotional brain and our thinking brain. And that's what a good human does. They have emotions, which they use as a source of intelligence, but they also have the ability to think and reason. So what you'll see from this slide, guys, is it says use coping strategies. So because the emotional brain stops the thinking brain from working, what we have to have is coping strategies to say to the thinking brain, no, catch up, I need you on board because I need you to think rationally and I need you to think logically. And I'm going to teach you what those coping strategies are. So stress originates from the emotional brain because fear has been triggered in us. And next Wednesday, when we do the next presentation of getting your business through COVID via the Humber Business Growth Hub, I'm going to be talking to you about, there's going to be a lot of employees that are feeling that fear coming back into your organisation, and how to manage everybody else's emotional brain. So think of it like you've got, if you've got staff of 50, sorry, you might have 50 5-year-olds, 6-year-olds, 4-year-olds coming back into the workplace. So I'm going to be talking about how do you manage that fear, that they're fearful of maybe coming back into the workplace. So we can see where stress originates, and we can see where we need coping strategies to deal with that stress. I will just say on this point that I was brought up that if I start to feel stressed, or I start to feel overwhelmed, or I start to feel upset, it was a good idea. I was taught to reach out for some form of food or alcohol or medication to try and calm those feelings. And I will say that they are not good coping mechanisms to rely on those sources to make you feel mentally well. They are not good ways to rely on, and I'm going to teach you more positive ways. So when we start to feel stress, so let's go back to the beginning of COVID, and it was all new and different, and nobody had been in this place before. What was happening was there was uncertainty, a lot of uncertainty for individuals, for companies, for countries. And when we feel uncertain, what that does to our brain is it triggers the fear. And so when we feel fear, we worry, we can get increased anger, there's tension that builds, that pressure builds, we start to feel overwhelmed. We can start to have panic attacks, we can feel anxiety, over emotional, and it can start to affect our sleep patterns. So what we can see is a lot of people's feelings and behavior are coming from their thoughts around uncertainty. So they don't feel safe. So if you're struggling with your mental health at the moment, I would say, okay, there's some part of you that is feeling uncertain about the future. And of course you are. Of course you're feeling uncertain about the future. We're going through one of the biggest things that has ever happened to our country in a long time. So it's understandable that you will feel uncertain. And it's understandable that then that's making your mental health deteriorate. And then what could be happening is you are reaching for those not very good coping mechanisms that are making your mental health deteriorate even more. So you get in this cycle, because if we're using not very positive coping mechanisms, the next morning we're back in that worry, anger, because we're not looking at changing the thoughts that are negative, that are fearful, that are uncertain. And I'm going to talk about that more as we move on. So how would you recognize mental health? So you may be feeling some of these, not all of these. Irritable, aggressive, impatient or wound up, overburdened, anxious, nervous, afraid, like racing thoughts that you can't seem to stop. They often come about 4 o'clock in the morning, or when you're trying to get to sleep, that you're trying to find a solution in your head and you just can't find a solution. So of course, if we're laid in bed and we are having a negative thought pattern, and what we know is that's triggering my emotional brain, and what we know is when my emotional brain gets triggered, a big rush of adrenaline and cortisol comes into my bloodstream to put me on red alert to say, hey, this situation dangerous, do you need to get out of it? Then what that's doing is adding to the negative thoughts, because that adrenaline and cortisol has to go somewhere. So that's why you can lay awake for hours and not feel any better. You manage to drop off, you get up the next morning and you think, God, what was I worried about? It's because the adrenaline and the cortisol had nowhere to go. It was running in your bloodstream. And that's why they say, make a list of what you're worried about. And what that does is it just tells your brain, it's okay, I'm on it, I'm going to sort it out. You can let go, don't worry. Okay, so an inability to enjoy yourself. You may feel depressed, uninterested in life, like you've lost your sense of humour, maybe a sense of dread, worried about your future, and just neglected or lonely. So a lot of people will be feeling that. If you recognise that in somebody else, then remember, we can influence people to go and reach out for help, but we can't make people go and reach out for help. So, one of the most painful things for me is when I see members of my family or my friends that are in a painful place, and I try and give them all the suggestions and ways that they can, improve the mental health, and they don't do any of it. And I've had to learn just to let go of that. That's not my job to fix them. That's their job to fix themselves. I can influence, I can make suggestions, but eventually I've got to let go and say, okay, you're over 18, you're an adult, you can take responsibility for this. I'm going to back off now. And then my mental health improves. So how might you behave? Finding it hard to make decisions, avoiding situations that are troubling you. We can all do that. If we think that we need to resolve a situation by having a conversation, and we suspect that conversation is going to be emotional, then we will avoid having that conversation. But of course, what we know now is the challenge is not going to disappear. The challenge is still going to be there. You may find yourself snapping at people, biting, picking at your nails, unable to concentrate, eating too much, smoking and drinking more than usual, feeling tearful, restless. We can all fluctuate with experiencing these behaviours. The key is to know when you've lost control over it and you don't feel in control of the behaviour that you're displaying. How might you be physically affected? So shallow breathing, hyperventilating. Sadly, you might have a panic attack. Eyes may get affected. We've talked about sleep. losing interest in sex or being able to enjoy sex, just feeling tired all the time, clenching your jaw, grinding your teeth in your sleep, headaches, chest pains, high blood pressure, indigestion, heart problems, constipation, feeling sick or dizzy. So you may be experiencing some of those things. But again, guys, what I'd say to you is, remember that our stress and our mental health deteriorates from our thinking. It is our thinking that is the start of this process that affects our mental health. So when I see clients, straight away, I'm not particularly interested in their behavior. What I'm interested in is the thinking. What are they thinking right now about their current situation? And an example I can give you of this is, years ago, I used to go into schools and work with young people, and I used to sort of like get sent, if you like, the naughty kids, for want of a better word. And when they would come to me, again, I wasn't particularly interested in the fact that they'd shouted out at the teacher or they'd twanged an elastic band at the kid next to them. What I wanted to know was, what are you thinking? What's going on in your head? How are you feeling? And, you know, it was so sad, because what was happening was these kids felt inferior, they felt not good enough, they felt unloved, you know, they felt as though they didn't make a difference on this planet. And so what I used to do when work with them is I used to change those negative thoughts into more positive thoughts, so they had self-respect, and then, oh, lo and behold, the behavior would improve. So if you've got somebody around you at the moment who is behaving in such a way like that, you might have young people, you know, you need to get into the thinking, you need to get into the thoughts. What's going on for you right now? What are you thinking? Because it's the thoughts that create the behavior. Okay, I'm just going to briefly touch on about mental health in the workplace, because obviously we are going to we are working at the moment, or we're going to be going back into the workplace. So if you've got mental health at the moment, and I'm going to make an assumption, guys, that you are employees within an organisation, because that's the title of the workshop. And so the responsibility is split, if you like. You have some responsibility in managing your mental health, and your manager and workplace has some responsibility. So let's start with your responsibilities. So your responsibility to improve your mental health, to enable you to do your job better, is having the courage to deal with home life pressures. And I know this from a personal experience, that when I first started my business, it was a time that I was going through my divorce, and no divorce is nice, I don't think, but it was particularly challenging. And I remember I was stood up delivering a workshop, and I was feeling worried, I was feeling anxious about the divorce, about what was happening, about my money, about where was I going to live. And I really felt at that time that I can't run this workshop. I was writing on a flip chart, and I thought, I can't turn around and continue this workshop. And I remember thinking at the time, gosh, isn't it a good job that I've got my own business? Because tomorrow, if I don't want to come into work, I don't have to go into work, because I have my own business. And it struck me then of how, you know, employers need to understand what's going on for their employees to help them to deal with that situation, and just be aware that the employee might not be at the top of their game if they're going through something like a divorce, a bereavement, a financial pressure. So what I'd say to you as an employee is, you know, have the courage to deal with your whatever's going on, but please reach out and talk to somebody that you trust in the workplace, whether it be your manager or HR or health. Speak to somebody about it and tell them what life is like for you. Your employee responsibility is taking care of your physical health, your mental health, your emotional health, and your spiritual health. It's about being honest with yourself and deciding to throw that magic rug away and say, I'm not going to put this rug over my problems anymore. I need to deal with it. I need to face it. And be open to receiving help. It might be professional support. I'll give you some details at the end of where you can reach out to. And really, you know, just be open to listening to that support from people who are trained in mental health to be able to help you understand it. Whoops, where's that gone? Sorry guys, let me just get my slide back. Where's that gone? Oh, sorry about this, guys. Just bear with me a second. Right, here we go. Okay, so, this is why I say it really is about taking responsibility for your own mental health. Now, the responsibilities that your manager has or your organisation is, they actually need to be discussing mental health with you and asking you questions and being supportive and just raising awareness of what mental health is. Now, some organisations, to be fair, are not all that good at this part, and that's why I go into companies and help them understand how to do this. They also have a responsibility for managing your workload. So if you go to them and you tell them that you're struggling with something because of something that's happening at home or something that's happening at work, then they have a responsibility to help you manage that workload, whether it be, more open to assigning tasks to other people or delegating or asking you what support you need. So they have a duty of care to support you with your mental health, but they can only do that if they know that you're struggling. And I think a lot of us don't like to sort of like share that we're struggling because we think it's weak. We think that, they'll think I can't cope. But actually, if you're going through really challenging life events, of course you're going to need some help. Of course you're going to need support. I still go and get support from people, whether it be a therapist or a healer or whatever. I still go and get support because I know that I need it. So it is their responsibility to be flexible, to offer you adjustments, to signpost you to other sources of help, and more importantly, to follow up with you. So to have a chat. You came to me last week, Sarah, and you was telling me that you're struggling with this aspect. How's it going? What's going on for you? So they do have a responsibility, but sadly, a lot of employers are not really sure what their responsibilities are, but you be the one to go ask the question and you be the one to say, I'm struggling, what support can you give me? Because most employers are pretty good in that they will try and help their staff just from a humane level. So the key point of this slide, guys, is to be open. If you're struggling with your mental health, please go talk to somebody at your work about it. And if you don't get a satisfactory answer the first time, go and find somebody else and talk to somebody else about it. Keep going until you find somebody who's going to take your situation seriously. Okay, so what we're going to do now is we're going to look at 10 ways that you can take ownership of your mental health. So if we think back to that diagram of the brain, with the emotional brain and the thinking brain, and then what I was saying is to shift ourselves out of that emotional, stressed brain, we need to have strategies. And these are the strategies, just a selection of strategies that I'm going to teach you now. If we had been taught these as a child or as a young person at college, then we would already know them. But what my experience is, nobody's really taught us them. And that's what my degrees have taught me, and my years of reading books, finding ways to make my mental health better, which is why I'm so passionate about sharing it with you guys now. Okay, so I'm just going to put a little disclaimer on here that, whenever you take the journey to improve your mental health, take it at your own pace. Improving your mental health is a process, and what you'll find is that we have to often have the courage to change the core of what is causing us the problem. So I've never, ever come across anybody that is suffering with their mental health, and after I've done my initial assessment, I have never said, well, I don't know why you're suffering with your mental health, everything looks great. There is always something that has triggered the mental health to deteriorate. So what I say on my website, anxietyrebranded.com, is I want you to see your anxiety or your depression or your mental health as a really positive sign from your body that it's asking you to do something different to how you are behaving. And that's why I've called one of my products Anxiety Rebranded, because what I'm saying is your anxiety, your mental health, your worry is a gift, because it's asking you to look at your life and deal with the stuff that your body is not happy with, that your thinking is not happy with. Now, of course, as soon as we start to go down that process of tackling the things that are causing us the problem, it can be scary. Yeah, it can be fearful, because it's like we've gone into a box and this box is sort of like full of sort of like insects, and we're rummaging around in this box going, right, let me find it. What is it that's my core problem? And so, of course, that can be quite a painful process. And so that's why I say, just take it at your own pace. You may need some support with that. And often our mental health doesn't even have to be in a bad place for us to want to improve our life and want us to grow as an individual and achieve our potential and transform and live a life that absolutely fills us with joy and pleasure and happiness. We don't have to be at the stress and anxiety level to start to do that. That's still improving your mental health. You might be watching this thinking, well, I'm okay, I'm fine, I don't have stress, I don't have anxiety. What I would say is, but are you operating at your potential? Are you living a life where each day you wake up and you feel a joy? You feel it's an absolute joy to be alive, because you're doing work that you absolutely love, you're in a harmonious relationship, or you're single and you're happy about being single, you're spending time doing what you love doing. That's when you've got good mental health. The majority of the time. We can all have days when we drop off, but the majority of the time it's like, yeah, I'm pretty good with what's going on in my life. So so just take whatever I'm going to say over the next 10 slides at your own pace, and there'll hopefully be one or two things that you think, yeah, that's the thing that I need to work on to get my mental health up to a number 10, so that I'm rocking and rolling in my life and I'm living a life that I'm absolutely joyful about. Okay, so number one, what we tend to do and why our mental health is not so good is we do not want to face reality a lot of the times. And so what sometimes we have to do is have a bit of a reality check. And I think one of the good things about COVID is it's given people the time to have a bit of a reality check about their life. But of course, that can be really painful, because who wants to admit that their life may not be as happy and as joyful as they want it to be? So what I want you to do, guys, is maybe after this event is just think, okay, what am I not facing? What reality am I not wanting to face, either in my home or work? So, I've got a couple of clients at the moment that online that are new clients, and it's because COVID's made them realise that their relationship is not a good place. They've had this time of isolating together and realised that, wow, I cannot abide seeing this person walk into my room each day. And so, it's quite a painful thing. And I think the challenge that we've got going forward is a lot of people are going to go back into the workplace after they've had weeks off of not having structure, not having to be a certain place. And that reality of having to go back into the workplace is going to be quite huge for some people, in the thinking, I don't want to be here anymore. I want to do something different with my life. And so this is all part of the process of improving your mental health. So this is a diagram that I have in one of my books. And what tends to happen is if we start at the bottom where it says fear. And what I want to say, guys, is as I start talking about this and you realise that you're stuck at one of the levels, I don't want you to start beating yourself up and being critical to yourself, because, of course, until somebody points it out, you don't know that you're behaving in a certain way. So take this as a gift, that it's just giving you a bit of awareness about something, and therefore we know what stage 2 is, taking action. So let's start at the bottom. Okay, what tends to happen for a lot of people is we stay stuck in the denial and blame of things. So what that means is we can moan and groan about something, and we can get annoyed about something, and we're in emotional turmoil, but we don't do anything about it. It's like we're on the roundabout of hell. We just keep going round. So we'll have an argument, we'll have a row, whether it be at work or home. We might come home on a Friday and go, right, that's it, I'm not going back to that workplace next week, I can't stand it, I've had enough, I'm going to look for another job. It's those sorts of things, yeah, and we just never seem to get to the point of being able to do something about it. So what tends to happen then is, if we're on this process, is we one day will wake up and think, something in my life has to change. I can't go on like this, complaining about the same stuff over and over again. I've been complaining about this for the last year, 3 years, 5 years, nothing's changed. And that was my realization of what made me get out of my marriage. I thought, I've been complaining about this for 3 years. If I don't get out of this, I'm going to be complaining about it in 30 years. And so we have that realization. And as it says there, something has to change. I can't go on like this, or my mental health will start to suffer. Yes, it will, because the universe is trying to tell you this is not good for your mental health. Whatever life you think you're living at the moment, it's not that good. You need to do something about it. But then what happens is we tend to then get all confused and we go, hang on a minute, why am I feeling like this? Why have I been so happy, so accepting, so used to being on that roundabout? And why now am I saying, no, not having it anymore, I need to change it? And that's just the way that you are evolving as a human being. Yeah, it's a brilliant, fantastic process. It means you're starting to be your authentic self. You're starting to step into your power, and that's where the true happiness comes. Now, as soon as we start to have that confusion, then the fear comes back and we start to feel frustrated and we start to think, there's no way I can change this situation. And we start to maybe do a little bit of you know, taking all the responsibility. God, it's me that's feeling this way. I see a lot in that in when I'm coaching individuals that want to leave relationships. It's like they take all the responsibility and say, I'm the one that's causing this other person pain because I want to change the game plan. I want to change the rules. And what I say to them is, you've got every right to change the rules. You've got every right to want to grow and develop and live in a more empowered way than what you are living at the moment. So keep going, keep continuing. What we can sometimes feel, though, if this confusion and the realization and the frustration gets too much, is we'll self-sabotage ourselves. So because we feel angry, anxious, upset, confused, that's when we turn to the food, we turn to the alcohol, we might turn to the drugs, we might sadly turn to thinking that we've got to, you know, bail out and, you know, commit suicide. It's not, it's part of the process of what you're going through. It's actually called waking up. You're waking up to the idea that you can be so much more than what you're playing at the moment. So what a lot of people do is they stay stuck at level number 5 and they just keep going round and round. And I stayed stuck at this point for probably about 2 years when I'd started I can't live like this in my marriage, it's making me unhealthy. So I would drink and I would use food because I didn't want to face it. I didn't just have one magic rug, I had one in every room. So whatever the challenges were, I didn't want to talk about them because I knew that he was going to get angry, and then I knew he would sulk, and that would cause me more pain. It would upset, you know, the household for my son. So I stayed at self-sabotage. But hopefully what you'll do after this webinar is, if you're feeling unhappy about your work or about any relationships or, you know, finances, anything that's going on that's affecting your mental health, you move up to the stage of acceptance. And that is such a powerful place to be, because you accept that you're at this point in your life and that you are self-sabotaging and that you do have a right to change. And once you reach acceptance about anything, you can then let go and you can start to then build up. So then you would move up to realizing that you need courage. I believe I have a right to happiness and I can change things. So we're talking about self-esteem, we're talking about self-belief, we're talking about the fact that you can achieve whatever you think you want to achieve. And then we go up to one of my favorite stages, number 8, which is take responsibility. And that is the idea that you can do something to change the situation that you are in. Whatever the situation is, you can either change it physically or you can change the way you think about it. And when we start to take responsibility, that's when we feel more confident, our mental health improves, and we start to really start living our life. Part of the process is trusting and accepting help. So that might be from people, and that might be from organisations, that might be from your boss, from your colleagues. And also, you know, I personally have a big spiritual faith in the universe. I do believe there is a divine intelligence around me that is guiding me, that is helping me. Some call it God, some call it Buddha, some call it love, whatever it is. I trust that for everybody watching this webinar, you have a divine intelligence that is pushing you to be happy. You know, we have been conned to think that we are on this planet and supposed to live in misery and happiness and pain. That is a con. We are meant to live here with joy and pleasure and deal with challenging situations with grace and dignity. So trust that you've got this help. And if you don't believe me, just say in your mind, okay, universe, give me the help. I'm ready for it. And finally, you then take action and take steps to improve the situation. And slowly the situation starts to change. So that's all part of having a reality check. Now, I know that some people after COVID will not want to admit what they've maybe realized about life, and they'll just be, as I call it, Facebook happy. You know, I'm going to put a picture on that I'm really happy, when actually, you know, are you really? So please, please, please have the courage to face your reality, admit what isn't working, follow this process, reach out for a one-to-one support session if this is connected to work, and you know, we can help you go through this process together. And it takes courage to face reality. I call it having a reality slap. It's quite painful, but you know, it's better to face reality rather than deny it and pretend that everything's fine, like I did for a couple of years. Okay, so partly of having good mental health is being able to have what's called self-awareness. And again, I swear this should be taught to young people as a GCSE. And having self-awareness is being aware of the thoughts that are going through your head at any one time, how those thoughts make you feel, and how those thoughts and feelings dictate your behaviour. So I'm going to give you an example to hopefully explain how this works. So the idea is, back in the day when I was married, I would get in on a night and I would just go straight to the fridge and reach for the white wine, the beer that I used to drink or whatever. And I didn't have any understanding of why I was doing that. My husband would then walk in and he would make a comment about something and we would end up having a row. And so I would just have this row. My boss would say something to me the next day and I'd be there furiously typing an email to somebody. I can't believe he said this. I can't believe he's done that. And so I was just driven by this behaviour all the time, and I didn't understand that there was a gap somewhere, there was a space in somewhere. So when I started to learn about self-awareness through my studies, what I was taught that is the behaviour, how I was behaving was a direct result of what I was feeling. So when I'm reaching for that bottle of chilled Pinot back in the day, I was feeling stressed, overwhelmed, knackered, tired, frustrated. But I couldn't have told you that I felt that. I just was, this wine will make me feel okay. And so when I then learned about this model, and I said, okay then, so if I'm feeling all that, what is causing me to feel those ways? What I learned was, well, it's the thoughts that are going through your head. So then I would get into the practice of writing down the thoughts of what I was thinking. And what I could see was, yes, the thoughts were, I'm really tired, I've worked hard all day, my boss hasn't respected me, I don't seem to be doing any good in my job, my young child keeps having tantrums, I'm a failure as a mother. So can we see that the thoughts, guys, that you have in your head drive your feelings, and the way that you feel is driving your behaviour. So if you're behaving in a negative way, then often, not often, the thoughts then will then be negative. So we get stuck in this loop. And like I said earlier with the kids at the school, I didn't tend to focus on the behaviour, I just went straight to the thoughts, because I knew that if I can change your thought, little person, I can help you feel better, and then your behaviour will be better. So even if you have to draw this out after this webinar and go through this process and go, right, what am I thinking right now, Thursday afternoon, 4:30? How does that make me feel? And how is that affecting my behaviour? What you're having then is self-awareness, and that is such a major thing to have, because you're back in control of your life. You're not a robot, you're not conditioned. You're having the awareness to be able to reflect on what is causing me to behave in this way. So if I said to you, oh, part of this webinar is you get a voucher for a flight to all paid flight and holiday to Tenerife when the flights start back, yeah, your behaviour then would probably be, if you like holidays like me, would be happy, giddy, positive, excited. Can you see those feelings, happy, excited, are coming from the thought that you've got a free holiday as part of listening to this webinar? Can you see that link? That is so important for you to see. So no matter who you're dealing with, whether it be at work, whether it be with your family, whether it be with friends, they too have this process going on. So when they are behaving in a negative way or a destructive way or an angry way, it's because they are thinking a certain way. So instead of commenting on the behaviour of, I get really frustrated when you leave those towels on the bathroom floor, get into the thinking. What makes you think it's okay to tell me? What's your perception of leaving towels on the bathroom floor? Oh, I don't know, Mum, I just leave them. You know, it's getting into the thoughts to understand what it's like for that person. So this then improves relationships at work, relationship with yourself, etc. So you know, develop self-awareness. How am I thinking? How's that affecting my feeling? How's that resulting in my behaviour? So let's look at that, writing down your thoughts. You know, get inside your head, literally write all your thoughts down. So if you're feeling a certain way, if you're feeling fed up, if you're feeling tired, whatever's going on for you, frustrated, angry, stressed, just get a piece of paper and just write down your thoughts. What is happening in your head? And then what you then need to do is investigate them for the truth. So if we've got this example here of this head and this person's thinking, I am useless. Of course, what we can see from this previous diagram is if that person's thinking, I am useless, there's no way they are going to be feeling excited, proud, happy. You know, they're not then going to behave in a way that is making them achieve goals and want to get out there. No, it's going to be the opposite. If I've got a thought that I'm useless, I'm going to feel unworthy. I'm going to feel probably contempt, shame for myself. And so what that then does is it drives my behaviour, and I go, well, there's no point me trying to do that job. I won't even go on that webinar. There's no point. So that's why being able to focus on your thoughts and say, why do I think I am useless? What evidence have I got that I am not useless? Or if you're facing a problem at the moment, you know, my business, like any other, has been affected by COVID. So right at the beginning of it happening, you know, I had to do a rejig my finances. And so what I had to do was write down my thoughts about what I thought was going to happen with my business, you know, and the problems that were going to come. And so then what I had to do was investigate them for what evidence do I think that's going to happen? What evidence do I think that my business is not going to survive? And then what I had to do is challenge myself to find a solution. So what can I do to make sure that my business still survives? Or what can I do to change the perception that I think my business is not going to survive? So you challenge yourself to find a solution, or you reframe the way that you are thinking it. And what's often a really good idea is to speak to somebody else about how you are seeing a situation. If you are seeing a situation in fear, I am useless, I'll fail, nothing good happens to me, I can't do this, speak to somebody positive and say, what am I not seeing? What would you say to help me in this situation? Because I think some research was done many years ago, and it said something like up to between 80 and 90% of what we think is negative So what they said was the average human has about 60,000 thoughts that go around in their head from the minute of waking up into consciousness and the minute of falling asleep. The average human has about 60,000 thoughts. You know, what day is it? I need to go shopping. Oh, I better get onto the webinar, whatever. And what they said was between 80 to 90% of those thoughts are negative. That was from an academic study that was done. So this is why it's so important to go, okay, let me change those negative thoughts to more positive thoughts. So challenge yourself to find a solution or reframe the way that you were thinking. And that's why it's so useful to reach out and find a coach or a therapist or somebody that's going to hold a mirror up and say, why do you think in this negative way? Why do you think you can't move from this job or situation or go for that promotion or, you know, challenge your employee? I'm going to help you realize that you can. Okay, so I'm just going to take a drink. We have got about half an hour. So again, balancing your mental health, improving your mental health is about balancing your life. So again, very simple diagram. You've got the ideas that I like simple things. What I want you to do is reflect on, have self-awareness about how much time do you in the week, how much time do you spend on resting? How much time do you spend on playing, as in being creative, having fun, doing things that you enjoy, great hobbies? How much time do you spend on work-based activities? And that's not just work as in going to your job each day. The work might be things that you have to do for your children, you know, taking them places or helping them with the homework or whatever you see as work, for example. And also, how much time in the week do you spend on your future? Looking at your future. Are you just letting future sort of like take over you, or are you in control of your future? So do you have goals? Do you have dreams? And, you know, if you want to improve your mental health, that would be a great thing to write in the box under future. I'm going to make my mental health be at a number 8 and 9, 80% of my working week or something like that. So when we're talking about rest, we're talking about actively calming that thinking brain and switching off, absolutely switching off. So, you know, you've got to find the appropriate rest that is right for you. And, you know, for me, it might be, you know, doing a bit of meditation or doing a little bit of, you know, just lying on the bed and just sort of like letting my mind go. It might be a bit of, you know, watching a bit of inspirational Netflix or whatever, something where I feel as though I'm sort of like resting. I'm letting my energy levels come back down. So your play might be exercise that you do, it might be a hobby that you do, it might be something like crafting, it might be hanging out with friends, but it's got to be productive play. Yeah, if I was filling this in a few years ago, I would have said, yeah, I go out every Friday night and, you know, I get hammered and it's a great laugh. That actually, what I've learned is not productive play, because I end up feeling absolutely shocking. I did used to, I don't drink anymore, but I used to feel shocking the next day, and so my mental health would be affected because my anxiety would be worse, my depression would be worse, because I'd used a toxin to try and make me feel better. So, you know, play, rest, work and future all needs to be balanced as much as you can. Try and get some balance where you absolutely switch off. Okay, people who suffer with mental health often are perfectionists, and this is quite a nice simple diagram that I devised to help people understand where they have ultra high perfectionistic expectations. And as you can see there, it says of yourself and of other people. And the trouble with having perfectionist expectations is it leads to burnout, because you nothing that you do is you think is good enough, and so you try more. I'll just stay on at work a little bit longer, I'll just redo that report again. I'll just prep for that meeting a bit more. And so what happens is that eats into your rest time, and that eats into you eroding your self-esteem. So I had a really good example of this when I realized this, that when I was on maternity leave with my son 14 years ago, we used to hang out with this lady who didn't work. Her husband worked, and she stayed at home with the little girl all the time. And so in the week, the odd time, a Wednesday, we would hang out together. And she would make her child the most amazing, meals with, fresh ingredients, and like this 3-year-old was eating like this ricotta cheese and, all this healthy stuff. And I was like thinking, oh my God, I've got to be like that. So there I was running my own business, but still having a bit of maternity leave. And I was putting all these ultra high perfectionist expectations on myself, because I was comparing myself to this person that had all this time to be able to shop and plan and take the time to, shovel this ricotta cheese down the 3-year-old or whatever. And I realised then, wow, I think you're expecting too much of yourself, Rach. Fish fingers, beans and chips once a week is not going to kill your son. He's going to be all right. And touch wood, 15 years later, is still here. So just have a sense of, am I being a perfectionist? If you're trying to work from home at the moment and still maintain the same level of output, if you've got small people running about, not possible whatsoever. I home educated my son for a couple of years, and wow, not possible to still maintain the same level of work whilst trying to do other things. So have a check in. Am I having perfectionist expectations? The challenge that you've got here is we don't realize we're having perfectionist expectations because we just think they're normal. So again, reflect with somebody else and say, I'm feeling a bit stressed. Do you think that the expectations I'm putting on myself are perfectionist? Now, I will give a little bit of a caveat here, guys. And I don't know if any of you have seen the film Devil Wears Prada, about the boss of, Vogue magazine or whatever fashion magazine it's pretending to be. And she has really high perfectionist expectations of all of staff members, really, of all the staff members. And she drives, I can't remember the author, and if we was in a room I would be asking you who not the author, who the actress is, can't remember, but she drives this staff member absolutely crazy with all these ultra high perfectionist expectations. I want a cup of coffee on my desk by 6:01 in the morning. I want the unedited version of the Harry Potter manuscript or whatever. And what happens is you see the actress who's having all these expectations placed upon her. You see it affecting her relationship, affecting herself, affecting her mental health. And then one day she realizes that this boss has just, ultra high, unreasonable expectations, and so she quits. So the point of my story is, you may be with somebody, whether it be at work, a colleague, a manager, a supervisor, or a relationship, where they have perfectionist expectations, which is causing you stress. So sometimes it's having the awareness of not buying into their perfectionist expectations and having a conversation with them about, can we just look at this chart, because I think that your expectations are a little bit perfectionist and I want to make them more reasonable, more appropriate. We're not saying we're going to have low expectations of ourselves and others, because that's not a good place to be, but sometimes it's just about looking and saying, how can I drop my expectations to be more reasonable so that my mental health is okay? And you may have ultra high perfectionist expectations of other people in your life that is causing you stress. So again, it's having that self-awareness to say, is it me putting the ultra high perfectionist expectations on my staff, my colleagues, my husband, my wife, whatever, or are they putting them on me? And let's have a conversation to make them more reasonable. And that's all it is, a conversation, a perception again. Okay, so how positive is your environment? So again, this is a really good way to simplify your environment. So your mental health is a direct result of how you spend your time. Let me read that again because it's so important. Your mental health is a direct result of how you spend your time. I'll give you another example. Years ago, I was at an airport and there was flight delay, and at first it was like, right, it's going to be a couple of hours, and it's going to be 4 hours, and we were at the point where we were ready to board. So we were sort of like in that holding pen, where they put everybody and you're absolutely cramped in as you sort of like go out to board. And at the time, I was with somebody that suffered with their mental health quite badly. And what I could see was that everybody else in that holding pen was getting angry, frustrated, starting to lose it. And I could see it was having an effect on the person that I was with. So I said, right, come on, we're going to go sit out of here. And we're just going to sit over there so we can still hear what's going on, but we're going to be away from that toxicity. And immediately within sort of like 10 minutes of leaving this sort of like hostile environment, the person that I was with started to feel a bit better and started to, be less anxious and more chilled and more positive. So our mental health is a direct result of how we spend our time and who we spend our time with, and also what we feed our mind. So this is a really good, simple way to be able to assess, is my environment causing my mental health to struggle? And what you'll see there is you've got a positive influence on your mental health and you've got a negative influence on your mental health. And of course, they're just examples in there. So, look at who in my life is a positive influence, who lifts me up, who inspires me, who is there to absolutely keep me, on my goals, and who keeps my mental health good. Then look at sort of like the programs that you're watching, the TV that you're watching. Maybe if you're watching something like soap operas, just have a check in with yourself after you finish watching it and go, do I feel really positive and lifted up and inspired? Or do I sort of like feel, a little bit flat or a little bit nothing really? I only watch stuff really, other than Gogglebox, I only really watch stuff that is based on true stories, that's inspirational, because I want to feed my mind positive stuff. Music can be so powerful for helping your mental health. Look at ways that you're spending time, reading self-help books, looking at YouTube, listening to podcasts, hanging out with people that are inspired. Internet, of course, we can all get addicted to sort of like the scrolling. Just ask yourself, is this making me, hang out at the 7, 8, 9, 10 end of the mental health spectrum? Or do I feel a little bit flat or a little bit zombied or a little bit, fed up of seeing what I've seen? So this is where the self-awareness comes in, guys. It's this idea that you become sort of like a mini psychologist, and you're looking down on your life at yourself and going, well, why is he doing that? Why is she behaving like that? That's not helping her. That's putting her at the left-hand end, the poor mental health. Why isn't she or he, spending the time more productive? And just to say on this, obviously, I'm going to have a conversation with my mum later about my dad and the operation, and if she starts, saying, oh gosh, I was really worried about him, and he's in hospital, I'm not going to go, oh, sorry, can't speak to your mum because you're being negative, and put the phone down. It's not about that. It's about having the compassion of where somebody is, and listening and supporting and sort of like reassuring. But that's it, not taking on board their fear or their emotions, and trusting that that person can handle it and trying to help them handle it as much as they can, but knowing that your mental health is the important thing. I know that if I'm not in a good place, I'm not good for my son, my parents, my friends. So I, spend so much time keeping this in a good place so that I can do my job and that I can, help those that I love around me. So just do a little bit of an audit on your life, guys, and just sort of like see what's adding to your life, what's lifting you up, what's making your mental health good, what's taking away, what's sucking at you, and ask yourself, what can I do to change that situation? Okay, we're now going to talk about something called, which I've named crumple buttons. And the idea is that these are the things, or an example of things that can cause us to be stressed, that can cause our mental health to suffer. So stress is the first set of symptoms, if you like, that are giving us a clue that our mental health may deteriorate if we don't do something about it. And so what I've found with, over the years of working with people is we all have what I call these crumple buttons. And if these get pressed in us, our mental health can massively suffer. So just have a look at these crumple buttons and just see if there's any on there that you can relate to. And how I talk about it with my clients is it's like they take away your power. So for example, after this presentation, I'm hoping that there'll be some of you that will think, right, I need to have a conversation with somebody about something that I'm not happy with. When you start to think about taking action, your fear of your, for example, your conflict and confrontation crumple button will be triggered, will be pressed. So if you know, like I used to know, that talking to my husband about the things that I wasn't happy about, I knew that he would get confrontational and there'd be conflict and it would make the house chaotic for 3 days. So what I used to do I didn't used to go and face that conflict and confrontation. I would ignore the situation. And so that was my fear. So like it says on the slide, your task in life is to not fear these triggers. So what I had to learn to improve my mental health was I had to improve my ability to handle conflict and confrontation. I had to improve my ability that it was to believe that it was okay to disappoint others, or to not be liked, or to get rejected, or to feel out of control. Because what happens is, if we have these fears, they control our life, and that's when our mental health is deteriorating. So part of improving your mental health is having the courage to recognize the triggers and say, okay, I need to get used to getting those pressed, because I need to get used to handle rejection. I need to get used to not being liked. I need to get used to being disapproved of. And what we're really talking about here is assertiveness. And there's loads of wonderful material out there to help you with assertiveness. And this is where the courage comes in. Yeah, this is where it takes courage to know that a situation may get a bit confrontational before it gets better, before it improves. So recognize your stress triggers and ask yourself, how can I learn to handle these stress triggers? Because say, for example, if I have a fear of not being liked, I'm unable then to say no to anybody, because my fear is that if you ask me to do something and I say no, you might not like me, and I can't handle those feelings of not being liked. So then can you see how that causes stress? Because our fear of not being liked means we won't say no, so we get overwhelmed by demands and by pressures. So what I had to learn, and what I'm asking you to learn, is be okay not being liked. As long as we're not being manipulative or rude or trying to harm somebody, if somebody doesn't want to like us because we're saying no, then maybe they're not meant to be in our life. So this is not about becoming some narcissist of selfish and not being liked and I don't care and I'm going to do exactly what I want. It's not about that. It's understanding what's causing me to feel overwhelmed. What am I not doing about it because I'm scared of these buttons being triggered? But actually what I need to do is learn to handle these buttons being triggered. So when I got divorced, gosh, did I learn about handling conflict and confrontation, even to the point that when I first rang a solicitor to say, I think I want to get divorced, I was absolutely crying my eyes out. I was so fearful. I was so fearful that I shouldn't be doing this thing. And the process sort of like 2 years later got me to the point where I was arguing with a barrister, because I was like, no, you're not on my side. No, we need a conversation about that. And I remember thinking, wow, I'm not frightened of conflict and confrontation anymore. But it was only because I'd put myself in the situation to face the conflict and confrontation that I learned I could handle it. And you'll have the same. You can look back on your life and realize that there were times when you avoided something, but when you actually did it, you were like, God, what was I scared of? And that's what they say fear stands for. Fear stands for false evidence appearing real. So do you remember all those thoughts we said to write down and then to look at them and look at, how true they are? you would look at them and you would see that it's a load of false evidence appearing real. So learn to recognize your stress triggers and learn to get used to being able to handle your triggers. Okay, so many of us have been brought up that we shouldn't show our emotions. You know, a lot of men have been brought up that, you know, big boys don't cry, put a rod of steel up your back, you know, various sayings like that. Again, a lot of women tend to repress their emotions because they get called over emotional or oversensitive. And so what tends to happen is, in a very simple way, is our body gets really bloody confused about the emotions that it's supposed to be displaying. And so when you're talking about panic attacks, if somebody comes to me with panic attacks, what I know is they've got a lot of repressed emotions inside that we slowly need to get out of their body. So emotions are electrical impulses of energy. That's what emotions are. And if you're like, oh, I don't know if I believe that, Rach, well, just think about anger. When you get really angry, you can't see the anger itself. You can see the effects of the anger. You can't see the anger, but you can feel the power in that anger. And that's because it's tiny, tiny electrical impulses. So what we have to learn to do is be able to express our emotions, because if we don't, guys, then our mental health is proper going to suffer. And a lot of people who have had traumatic childhoods where they weren't allowed to express their anger, or they weren't allowed to express their sadness, you will often find that either they're using a lot of coping mechanisms such as alcohol or antidepressants to just try and manage manage all those emotions that are inside. And you know, when people like that come to me, it's about teaching them how to honor the emotions, how to respect the emotions, how to listen to the emotions. So it's about expressing your emotions in a safe way for you and others. So what I recommend all my clients to do is to write in a journal about how they're feeling. And what that's doing is it's telling your body that it's honoring how it's feeling simply by writing it down. So the act of writing the emotions down gets the electrical energy out of your body onto the paper. And so then the body can be processing what it's supposed to be processing, rather than trying to deal with all these emotions that are hidden. So, you know, anger, many of us bottle it up, we shout, we drink alcohol, but then of course there's better ways to deal with anger. Release it, talk about it, you know, go running, get a punch bag, whatever. I'm not going to read all of them because, you know, you'll be able to sort of like see it for yourself, but just have a check into yourself of, okay, how am I handling my emotions? And is there a better way for me to handle my emotions? I once had a guy on a course who came on one of my courses, and he'd been on antidepressants for a couple of years. So I asked him, when did you go on them? And he said, well, it must have been a couple of months after my mum passed away. He said, I was really close to her. And I went on them a couple of months after. So I said, how much did you cry? How much did you grieve when your mum passed away? And, you know, it was like, oh, I don't cry. No, you know, I had to be strong for my family. I had to be strong for my wife. No, I didn't cry. You know, and I said to him, I said, I guarantee that if you give yourself permission to grieve, even now, 2 years after, you will be able to get off those antidepressants eventually, because your feelings want to be heard. You know, if you've had a bereavement, guys, grief is the natural reaction to bereavement. You know, to grieve is to love is to grieve. We have to be able to go into that emotion and sit with that grief, and not expect ourselves to have a couple of down days or the day after the funeral to think, right, that's it, I've got to get back onto it. Our emotions don't work like that. Our soul is grieving over somebody that it's had a connection with, and it can take up to 2 years for that grief to get to a point where it doesn't affect us each day. So, you know, be aware of emotions. And again, the brilliant thing about the internet now is there's so much valuable information out there. So if you just put into the internet safe ways to express emotions, you'd get loads of stuff come up. Okay, so I've talked a little bit about relaxing. So, just after this webinar, I want you to think about how are you going to quieten your mind from now on? How are you going to really relax? I like to go for a massage. I like to go for some energy healing. That's my way of relaxing, but you find your own ways. Yours might be cycling. Gosh, it might be going for a round of golf or whatever, a nice bath with, bubbles or whatever. Find the most appropriate way for relaxing for yourself. And I've just put there, connect to a higher force. Over the years, I've really realised that unless we have a belief in something transcendent, something that's bigger than ourselves, we'll never get to the 10 out of 10 for mental health. We've got to believe that there is something out there, that there's a point to our existence, there's something supporting us, there's something helping us, whatever that may be. Start to explore, your connection to a higher force. Okay, so just got a couple of minutes for the questions. So number 10, take action. Yeah, if things have resonated during this presentation, stage 2 of the process is to reach out to someone. Whether it be a friend, a colleague, your boss, private therapist, coach like myself, or there's many others out there that are wonderful. Local GP, you can access talking therapies via your local GP, and I would highly, highly recommend that. I've dipped in from time to time over the last few years and just had 6 sessions, and sort of like it's like they dust you off and they pick you back up. So when life does throw those curveballs at you, you do need to get help. Mind.org have got brilliant resources online. Obviously there's Samaritans. There's just so much help out there, guys. The little caveat that I would say is that if you go to the doctors, what the doctor might do is refer, if you say, look, I'm suffering with my mental health, he or she might refer you to a triage to go through to sort of like primary services for mental health. And what will happen there is you'll get asked questions of how much your mental health is affecting your day-to-day life. And there's 2 questionnaires, a generalized anxiety disorder with 9 questions and a personality questionnaire with 7 questions. And you basically just tick them on a scale of every day, every other day, once or twice a week or whatever. What I would just say, guys, is just be careful if you get given those questionnaires, because those questionnaires were devised by a group of psychologists. It was a study, but the study was funded by a pharmaceutical company. So the pharmaceutical companies obviously want to sell to the doctors and to the healthcare services medication to try and help you with your mental health. So my own personal opinion, not of the Humber Business Growth Hub, is that sometimes you may be told that you need medication when you might not. And I'm not saying that medication shouldn't be taken, because sometimes there is a need for medication. What I would say is what you need is some support to help you deal with the issues that are causing you to feel the way that you're feeling. And hopefully what you've got from this presentation is that there will be reasons why your mental health will not be as good as you want it to be. And what I want you to do is start looking at those reasons and start taking action to get some help. That's really what I want you to have taken from this, that you are in control of improving your mental health. Yes, you may need help from some other people, but you ultimately can take control of your mental health. Okay, so just to finish then before the questions, so as I've just said, you can take action to improve your mental health. You are in a position to be able to do that. You've got the resources inside of you. You may need the help from other people, but ultimately you can take action. Identify what's causing you the stress. Please do not ignore it. Now is not the time to ignore it. Use this time now to start facing it. Ask your workplace to help you. And, hopefully what you'll have seen from me is that, I've been there, I've been down that scale of poor mental health. I did use alcohol to cope, not to the extent that I would have called myself an alcoholic, but did I rely on it? Yes. Did it have control over me? Yes, it did. And over the years, I've learned how to not have to rely on those unhealthy coping mechanisms, but find more coping mechanisms. And personally, that's what I try and do with my 15-year-old, all the time, is teach him that there's 2 ways to manage your mental health, and to use the more empowered solutions. It's just that we haven't been taught how to do that. I wasn't taught how to do that because my parents didn't understand, because nobody had taught them. So hopefully now you can see that there's some good ways. So if you need some more support, or if you want to discuss this in any way, then the Humber Business Growth Hub will fund one-to-one sessions. So you reach out to Humber Business Growth Hub and explain to them what you're actually looking for, and then I can support you with the process of helping you get good mental health, awesome mental health. So it's just after 15:15, so I'm going to check back with Paul and just see if any questions have come in.
Thank you very much, Rachel. I think once again a very insightful presentation. I think it's always very good to get not theory-based support and advice as such, but someone who's actually lived it, understands it at a practical level, and can share that sort of best practice guidelines. So that's really helpful.
No problem.
Yes, I think that's quite thorough. No questions so far, but we have 10 minutes now, so if anybody would like to ask any questions, this is totally anonymous. We won't be sharing your names or details of anybody, so feel free to ask in confidence. I will anonymize this when I ask Rachel your question. I wouldn't mind starting off with one just while we're waiting for you to come through, Rachel. It's one that I asked yesterday in the weekly session that we run. In terms of Sunday's announcement from Boris Johnson about his roadmap to coming out of lockdown, what would you say are the biggest worries that employees might have, or even business owners might have, in terms of returning to work?
Yeah, it's trying to sort of put myself into that position of if I was an employee and having to go back into the workplace. And I think the challenge that a lot of people have had is that they've sort of like been in this bubble. We've all been in this bubble, and the only really, for a lot of us, the only really information that has come into that bubble is that which the news has been telling us about, for some people. And I think therefore the fear levels of a lot of employees might be quite high, especially if they've been on social media and they've seen people saying, oh, I know somebody that's died from it, etc. and etc. So I think regarding to the fears, it's that fear of safety. Am I going to pick up this virus, which of course then can lead to, gosh, does that mean I'm going to die? Because people are dying, because there's this big death rate that the media is pumping out there of how many people are dying from it. Are my colleagues going to be okay? Am I going to go to work and then come back and give it to my son? So I think there'll be all different fears. And the thing with fear is, Paul, it's all about perception. It's all about how we are seeing the situation, the information that we're telling ourselves. So we're all looking at the information and then we're perceiving it. And we can either perceive it through that emotional brain, which is stress and fear, or we can perceive it through the rational, logical thinking brain. So I personally don't tend to watch a lot of the news, because I do think a lot of it is just to create fear and hysteria. So I will watch a lot of the alternative media, and I'll do my own research and I'll find out what our alternative media source is saying. So I think what employers have to be aware of is there may be these heightened fears that employees have, and themselves as an employer might be thinking, why are people freaking out about it? It's fine. And being able to manage those fears and talk to their staff about the fears. So, we talked yesterday about, the secret to talking mental health with your staff is just ask them. Just ask, what are your fears? I feel a bit of a fake saying it, because it's like, that's, it's not this big miraculous sort of like secret. Ask your employees, what are you scared of coming back? What do we need to be aware of as a manager, as a company owner? What's going through your mind? What do you think is going to happen? And once you've got all that amazing intel and data, then as a company owner, you can then put plans and policies in place to calm the fears down. whether that be, you know, an email that's going to go out to tell them, or a meeting or whatever. So I think, you know, I don't feel as I've answered the question in such as I'm telling you what the fears are, because I don't really come from a fearful place. But what I would say to an employer is ask your staff the question, and no matter what they say, what you've got to remember is that's their perception and that's real for them. So you deal with that. You know, if I ever do couples together, if one person says something and they say, but I feel this, and the other person says, well, I don't know why I feel that, the point is, but that's what they feel, and that's okay. You might not agree with it, but that's what they feel, and that's what we need to look at. So what I would say is, you know, be absolutely open and transparent, ask the question, but then more importantly, put an action plan in place to be able to deal with whatever those fears are, whatever they come up with.
Very sensible advice, thank you. We've got a few more questions that have come in, so I'm going to make my way through these, if that's okay. Why do you think alcohol is the heart of some people's issues? And do you think that the current lockdown period will result in more people with alcohol-related mental health problems?
Yeah, what was the first part of the question again? Why is alcohol?
Why do you think that alcohol is at the heart of some people's issues?
Quite simply, that's a really good question. Quite simply, when I look back at my own life, that is how I had been taught to cope with life. And I don't mean to say that, you know, my parents sat me down and went, right, what you need to do is, you know, drink this alcohol and it's going to make you feel better. You know, of course, they didn't say that. But what I did was I watched how they dealt with life. And I watched how they dealt with situations. And as children, that's what we do. We have to look at our role models around us and say, well, what do they seem to be doing? So, you know, it was like, oh, it's somebody's birthday. Let's have some alcohol to celebrate. You know, oh, somebody's died. Let's have some alcohol to cheer ourselves up. And so, you know, it's probably a bad subject to pick for me because I'm quite emotive about alcohol and I can, you know, I could do a webinar on it. But, you know, the point is, we are just conditioned, I believe, as a society to just think that alcohol is the answer and alcohol is the solution. And as we know, alcohol is a poison. And so our body can't deal with that poison. It can't process the poison. We know that because we have a hangover. That's our body saying that crap that you've just put in me, excuse my French, is not good. And I'm going to have to make you feel horrendous to get it out of the system. And so then, of course, it has an effect on our chemicals in our brain. So it's very sad when people have got addicted to alcohol, but often I feel so much compassion because nobody had ever taught them not to deal with the problems in that way. And I know with my son, he's 15, I've said to him, if you go down having a drink, Luke, like your friends, know why you're having it. If you're having it to make a party be more fun, you're not at the right party. If you're having alcohol to make hanging out with your friends more acceptable, you're hanging out with the wrong people. So yes, that's why I think we use alcohol as a condition, as a way to help us. And sorry, what was the second part of the question?
The second part is, do you think the lockdown period will result in more people with mental health problems?
Yeah, sadly I do. I really do. And you know, I'm hoping that once they come out of this, they'll be able to access the right support and everything.
Okay, thank you for that. The next question, I think this is one that's probably going to be felt by a lot of people. I know certainly some of my staff have to deal with this issue weekly. When working from home, dealing with children, and also being responsible for lots of young people who work for you, it's quite overwhelming itself. But when working at home with your own kids around, it can be very overwhelming and it can create burnout. We can't, I think as business owners or even employees, it's hard to get that balance right, isn't it? How do you go about starting to prioritize all these plates that you're spinning? You know, your home life, your children, homeschooling, your work, your priorities, yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. It is, again, another really good question, and this is where I think we've got to let go of the perfectionist expectations of ourselves, and we've got to realise that we can't operate how we were operating. I think it's about having transparent conversations with everybody in our family, so with our partner. I know I had one client, bless her, who you know, she'd been used to going to work, and now she was at home all the time with the 3-year-old, and her husband was used to going out to work. So you know, they had to sit down and literally draw up sort of like a battle plan and say, right, how are we going to do this? When are you going to have the sun? When am I going to have the sun? How am I going to get time out? How are you going to get time out? So it's about having transparent conversations with those in your life, family, friends, but also about with your work colleagues, with your managers, with your bosses. And you know what, Paul, just being honest and just having the courage to be honest and say, I am struggling and this is what I need to do. And then my last bit of advice on that one is there's a really good book called Feel the Fear and Do It Anywhere, led by Susan Jeffers. It's been about for 30 years. And in there, she has a strategy where you basically get a piece of paper, you separate the piece of paper into 9 areas. So you've got 2 rectangles and then 2 verticals. So you've got literally 9 boxes on this piece of paper. And then what you do is you put a heading in each of the boxes. So in one box, you might have work, in another one, you might have family, in another one, you might have rest, in another one, you might have, you know, fun. And what you do is you set little objectives in each box under each heading of what you need to do to make that box be operating, you know, at a more powerful way for you to manage and other people to manage. So when I'm feeling overwhelmed, that's what I do. I get a pad of Post-its. I write everything on the Post-its, one action on each Post-it of what I'm feeling overwhelmed with, of what I need to do. I stick them on my wall, and then what I do is I separate them into 9 areas. So I've got a theme, and then I say, what do I need to do in the area of my work? What do I need to do in the area of my family? What do I need to do in the area of my finances? And set sort of like your SMART objectives in each box. And be kind to yourself. You know, just be kind to yourself and admit that, you know, you're doing the best you can in a bloody crazy situation.
We're coming up to our time now, Rachel. If you could, as a closing statement, if you could give one walk away message, if there's one thing that people should do when they finish this call now that could help them take steps towards everything you've talked about today, what would you say the first thing they should do is when they end the call today?
What I would say is I have given an awful lot of information in 2 hours. It's basically about 20 years worth of, you know, my experience and my ideas there. So what I would say is pick the thing that resonated with you and work on one thing. Just look at one thing. And what I'll often say to my clients is even you just changing the way you think. So say, for example, if you've realized that your job maybe isn't the best place for you, you don't have to tell anybody that information. You can just keep that information up in your head, and that awareness that you know that information is enough to improve your mental health. So you don't have to go tell everybody what you're going to change. Just sit with it and just enjoy that process of thinking. I'm thinking a little bit different, and that's a bit scary, but I'm just going to think about it. So pick one thing, don't get overwhelmed.
Brilliant, thank you very much. I think we've come to the end of our questions today. So I'd like to thank Rachel for her time and efforts today and for presenting us with a really good presentation with some very handy, useful information and guidance for us to look after ourselves. We say staff are the most important assets, but of course, as business owners, of course, we must fit into that category as well. So it really is important to look after yourselves. As Rachel said, if you are looking for further support within this field, within this topic, please speak to the Humber Growth Hub team and they will talk about your eligibility and what support we can provide you on a one-to-one basis following today. Also, please do check the Growth Hub's website as usual for all future events that are going to be held. There'll shortly be a new calendar of events available to help all businesses looking to now start taking steps towards going back to whatever normality may look like moving forwards. So do keep checking the website. Sorry, I think we might have had one last question come in. Don't want anyone to not have their questions answered. Oh no, it's just a note of thank you to you, Rachel. In fact, there's a few of them. So on behalf of the audience, thank you. Do keep checking the website at the Humber Growth Hub though, and the hashtag Grow My SME webpage for all updates relating to government support, local support for supporting your businesses, your staff, your employee base, everything. Thank you for today. Stay safe, enjoy the long weekend, and we hope to see you in future workshops. But for now, thank you very much.
Thanks, guys. Thanks for listening.